Hi, I'm Ronald. And if you're feeling a bit lost or overwhelmed by the Bible, please know that you're not alone. I've been there. I tried to understand the Bible for years, but it felt like I was hitting a wall. But then something beautiful happened. God's truth touched my heart and everything changed. Now I'm filled with this passion to share that hope with you. I love taking these powerful stories and making them a little easier to grasp and a little more relatable, making them more accessible so that we can all experience the incredible power within them. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned reader, I believe that there's always something new to discover and a fresh perspective to gain. Let's dive into Numbers chapters 14 and 15 together and see what God says to us today. Chapters 14 details the Israelites' rebellion against God's command to enter Canaan, their subsequent punishment, and a failed attempt to take the land. The main themes are the consequences of unbelief, God's patience and justice, and trusting in His promises. Verses 1 to 4, the entire congregation of Israel weeps and complains against Moses and Aaron. They even go as far as to suggest that they appoint a new leader and return to Egypt again. 5 to 10, Moses and Aaron fall on their faces before the congregation, and Joshua and Caleb, the two who trusted God, urge the people to trust the Lord and to enter the land, emphasizing the goodness. The congregation threatens to stone Joshua and Caleb, and then the glory of the Lord appears in the tent of meeting. Verses 11 to 25, the Lord expresses His anger and threatens to strike the Israelites with a plague, but Moses intercedes once again, pleading for God's mercy and reminding him of his reputation among the nations. God relents from destroying them, but declares that those who rebelled will not enter the promised land. God says that the children of the current generation will wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and that only Joshua and Caleb will enter the promised land. The number 40 appears frequently in the Bible and carries a significant symbolic weight. It's not simply a random number. It's usually associated with a period of testing and trials. Now, the 40 years the Israelites spent wandering in the wilderness, which we're just now getting into, was a period of testing and refining, a consequence of their disobedience and lack of faith. Jesus spent 40 days and nights in the wilderness facing temptation before beginning His ministry in Matthew 4:2. These periods often involve God preparing and training individuals and communities for a specific purpose. Moses spent significant periods of 40 days on Mount Sinai receiving God's laws and instructions in Exodus 24:18. 40 years can also represent a generation, signifying a period of transition and change. This applies to the Israelites now wandering in the desert until this generation passes. Also, the 40 days of rain during Noah's flood symbolize God's judgment on the wickedness of humanity in Genesis 7:4. And Jonah gave the city of Nineveh 40 days to repent in Jonah 3 verses 5 to 10. While the exact meaning can vary depending on the context, the number 40 generally signifies a substantial period of time marked by significant spiritual or historical events. It often involves a transformation process through trials, preparation, or judgment. Now moving on, in verse 26 to 35, God declares that the rebellious generation will die in the wilderness. Because the spies spent 40 days exploring the land, 20 days each way, the people will wander for 40 years, 1 year for each day that they were away. All the men who brought back a negative report will die by a plague before the Lord. Now, it's worth repeating that we all deserve death, and it is only by God's mercy that we are sustained. Verses 36 to 38 confirm the death of the 10 men who gave the bad report, and Joshua and Caleb are the only two from the spies who lived. This chapter ends with 39 to 45, where despite God's warnings, the Israelites attempt to ascend into the hill country, but the Amalekites and the Canaanites defeat them. Now, Moses warns them that the Lord is not with them and that they will be defeated. Numbers 14 portrays the devastating consequences of unbelief and disobedience. It highlights God's patience, mercy, and unwavering commitment to His promises and justice. It's a powerful reminder of the importance of trusting God, even when faced with fear and uncertainty. Numbers chapter 15 provides further instructions regarding offerings and sacrifices the Israelites would present once they entered the promised land. It also addresses the laws concerning unintentional sin and the consequences of intentional disobedience. Finally, it concludes with God's command to wear tassels as a reminder of his commandments. Verses 1 to 16, the Lord gives Moses instructions concerning the offerings that they would present when they entered the land of Canaan. These instructions detail the type of offerings, including burnt and peace offerings, and the accompanying grain and drink offerings. God clarifies that these laws apply to the native Israelites and foreigners living among them, emphasizing the universality of his commands. Now, verses 17 to 21, instructions are given regarding the offerings of the first of their ground meal as a heave offering to the Lord. And 22 to 29, this section addresses the laws concerning unintentional sins committed by the entire congregation or an individual. It outlines the required sacrifices for atonement in such cases, highlighting God's provision for forgiveness when sins are committed unknowingly. Verses 30 to 31, in contrast, emphasize the severe consequences of intentional disobedience, stating that those who act presumptuously will be cut off from their people. Now, cut off from their people means that since they committed these sins knowingly and deliberately, they were described as blasphemous because they were an arrogant act of insubordination against the Lord. Anyone guilty of presumptuous sin was excommunicated from Israel and put to death. This section stresses the seriousness of willful sin. Verses 32 to 36, this section tells of a man found gathering sticks on the Sabbath. Now, God commands that the man be stoned by the whole congregation, reinforcing the importance of observing the Sabbath. Verses 37 to 41, the Lord instructs the Israelites to make tassels on the corners of their garments with blue cord as a reminder to obey his commandments. This serves as a constant visual reminder of their covenant with God. And lastly, God reminds them that he is the Lord who brought them out of Egypt. Numbers chapter 15 reinforces the importance of proper worship and obedience to God's laws. It distinguishes between unintentional and intentional sins, highlighting God's mercy and justice. It also emphasized the need to constantly remember God's commandments by wearing tassels. That's it for today. I'm going to leave it here. Thank you so much for watching. May God bless you all, and I hope to see you on the next one.